Hello, everyone. I want to thank you for joining our webinar today, SSIS Expert Series, End-to-End Contact Data Quality. I'm Jimena Mejerado from Melissa Data, and joining me today is Data Quality Analyst Joseph Fertito. Joseph is going to cover all the aspects of contact data cleansing using data quality components for SQL Server integration services. He will cover profiling, parsing, standardizing, verifying, deduping, and much more. But before we get started, I want to encourage everyone to submit questions today. You can type those in at any time during the presentation, and towards the end of the webinar, we'll get to answering some of those. We do get a lot of questions submitted, so if we aren't able to answer your question today, Joseph will answer it via email. This webinar will be recorded, so if you miss anything or want to rewatch this webinar at a later time, you will be able to do that. All right, let's get started. Here is Joseph.
Thank you, Jimena. Again, my name is Joseph, Data Quality Analyst at Melissa Data. So thank you guys for attending this webinar. What we're going to cover today is data quality from beginning all the way to end. As soon as data comes in, all the way to when contact data is put out on your final data set. We would like to show you, or I would like to show you what some of the problems are that you can encounter and what kind of solutions you can employ in order to fix a lot of these problems. So before anything else, I want to actually differentiate the difference between a more generalized approach when it comes to data cleansing versus contact data cleansing, because these two are very different domains and they involve very different types of rules when it comes to cleansing. When you're trying to clean generic forms of data, there are rules that you can employ in order to be able to clean data. For example, putting in some regular expressions to remove special characters or unnecessary characters, remove all the spaces and whatnot. But these generic types of rules, although they also apply to contact data, there are much more complicated rules involved when we speak of things like addresses, for example, because with addresses, there are a lot more things you have to check for. There are specific rules that are revolving around addresses. For example, an address is supposed to have a street name and a range at the very minimum, although it could also sometimes have directionals and suffixes and so on. Email addresses have the same rules and industry standards that need to be followed. There are syntaxes when it comes to emails, proper syntax, proper casing, proper characters that you need to be able to use, and there is also a standard RFC standards for email addresses. So these are, again, domain-specific rules that apply specifically to contact type data. And that doesn't apply to more generic data types. Also, when we talk about contact data cleansing, a lot of the cleaning regimens that you need to employ require data, some form of reference data. It has to be data driven and not purely based on algorithms alone, because the techniques for cleansing and validation are more elaborate, it's more extensive, and it almost requires you to have reference data. For example, phone number verification. There is really no other way for you to be able to verify phone numbers and clean it efficiently without the use of some form of reference data, maybe, a list of all the possible area codes in the United States or whatever country you're in, and so on. So you need to be able to leverage the use of reference data to be able to perform the best type of data cleansing. I want to show you a little image here of how we define data quality. This is called the data quality cycle, and it begins first and foremost with profiling, and it goes around all the way to hygiene, to the actual cleansing of data, data verification, enrichment, updating, matching, merging, and monitoring, and all the way back to profiling. So let's go through each one of these, and I want to kind of describe what is done in each phase. As soon as data comes in, the first thing we want to be able to do is to profile data. We want to gather as much information as we can, statistics and other types of column and column information. But the point is being able to gather data about your data. And this is called metadata, to be able to identify some of the problems that we have, like how many spaces do we have in our data, our extra spaces, how many nulls, blanks in the database, incorrect patterns, unstandardized data, and so on. And this really allows us to take a step back and gain an overall understanding of our data through the statistical analysis and metadata that we're getting. Again, allows us to step back and see our entire data as a whole, get a better idea of what the problems are, how good and how bad our data actually is through profiling. After you've profiled your data, then you want to get into the actual cleansing part. Data standardization, normalization, cleaning the actual data, putting it in its proper casing, proper formatting, removal of unnecessary characters, and so on. And then you want to be able to address things like, abbreviating it how it should be, keeping it standard throughout your entire data set, being able to parse components into the proper fields, correcting any types of misspellings, and so on. So all the hygiene regimens that you need to be able to perform is done next after you actually know what the problems are. Otherwise, you wouldn't know what to clean anyway. And then you have to verify the actual content of data. Uh, this is especially true when it comes to contact information. You want to be able to address the questions like, are the addresses actually deliverable? Are my phone numbers callable? Email addresses, are they sendable? And do these people names that I have, or maybe company names, are they real people's names or company names? Um, and on top of that, you also probably want to be able, especially when it comes to contact, you want to be able to associate all of this information with each other. Does the person actually have that phone number and that address and that email? Well, that's something we got to find out, right? In order to be able to tell if our data is good or bad. And that's all part of data verification. And then afterwards, you want to be able to enrich and update your data. After you've cleansed it, after you've verified all that good information, all that good stuff, you want to be able to give it a little bit more. And this is done through enrichment and updating. So if you've got any missing information that you can append, you want to be able to fill all of that in, and maybe even include other types of data like geographic information, all sorts of business and individual demographics, property information, and so on. And then, of course, if you want to be able to keep your data fresh, because data is always changing. Data always, or over time, gets stale. So people move all the time, people change phone numbers. So you want to be able to get the latest information for people. So if a person has, say, for example, moved somewhere else into another home, another address, you want to be able to get that latest address. And this is all part of enrichment and updating. The next step in the data quality cycle would be our matching. So you want to also be able to find all the duplicates in the data. And duplicates in data is something that a lot of people neglect. They don't actually uh, always clean it, I would say. And but having dupes in the data is actually very costly. So you want to be able to dedupe your data, whether it's through exact matches, or you want to also be able to do deduplication based off of a fuzzy matching algorithm. So Joe Vertido versus Joseph Vertido, even though they're not spelled exactly the same, you want to be able to catch these, and this is all part of matching. And then after you find all of the duplicates in the data, you want to merge them together into a single version of the truth. So either you select the golden record, whether you want to be able to rank all of the duplicate data, and then pick the best one, or you want to be able to merge them into a single one using consolidation and survivorship techniques. So that again, you can have a single version of the truth. And then last but certainly not the least, you've got monitoring. And what monitoring is just profiling over time. It is continuously gathering metadata, and it allows us to maintain the quality of our data over time, because data quality is not just a one-time thing. It is a cycle. It should be ongoing. And the reason for this is because data is always changing, data is always going bad over time, and we want to be able to continue to keep cleansing it, to keep updating it, to make sure it stays good over time. And with that, I'd actually want to show you an implementation of all of these aspects within SQL Server integration services through the use of the tools that we've come up here in Melissa Data. So here I've got SQL Server SSIS or SQL Server data tools pulled up. And if hopefully most of you are familiar with SSIS already, but I've created a project here, and I don't want us to get overwhelmed by what we're seeing. I'm going to go through each and every one of these step by step. I'll try to be as clear as possible with this. But over here at the left, I want to show you, if you notice, you've got different tools here with the MD prefix. These are all the plugins that Melissa Data has developed for SSIS that allows you to perform different kinds of data quality cleansing routines, including your address checking, your verification, your correction, your standardization, your updating of data. All of these can be done through these components. And like any of the other components in SSIS, you can just drag and drop them, right? And then you set them up, you make use of them, and you get all of the fun stuff from data cleansing. So I want to actually walk through the components now. I've got the project itself starts here with our input data. So I've got, let me show you if I preview this data here. I've got an input file of typical contact information. You know, you got names, addresses, a city, state, zip code, email address, and phones. And some of you will notice already how, you know, some of the names have dual names in it. Probably not very good practice. You've got a lot of the addresses are unstandardized. This one has a suite information on it. These ones have periods on it. This one has an unabbreviated suffix. For the states, you got some states that are mangled. You've got an alphanumeric character for the state, which is not acceptable. You've got missing information like zip codes not being there. These are all problems. And this one even has extra digits on the zip code. You got email addresses that have syntax errors. This is certainly not deliverable, in case you didn't know. And you've got standardization problems. You got phone numbers that are missing. You got phone numbers that are formatted in different ways. Just, you know, problems, data quality problems all over the place. And this is very typical. You will almost always have some sort of problem or in your data, whether it's formatting, whether it's missing data or whatnot. There's always going to be problems with your data that needs to be cleaned. So that's pretty much given. And what we do first, again, based on the data quality cycle, is we do our profiling. So we get some of the information out of the data. So this will show us what kind of problems we're running into. And then we run it through contact verify component, which is in charge of the correction, standardization, parsing, and the validation of our domains, our contact records. And then we use personator component in order to verify, append, and enrich data. And then you also have, it then goes through our smart mover component that does the updating for people who have moved to another address. And then you've got our matchup, which does our deduplication and consolidation of records. And then finally, we use again our profiler component so we can show you how well we've performed our data cleansing. So I'm going to go ahead and execute this project. And then I'm going to walk you through the results of each component one by one. So again, we've got our input data. It's first going to go through the profiler component. It's going to go and profile my data. So I get from my profiler, and we see here we've got 3 possible outputs for profiler. So profiler, I've got column-based counts that I'm outputting here so I can show you guys. And I'm outputting some overall record counts that I also want to show you guys. And of course, we're passing through that data so it can go through the next step. So that's just what that is. First, we review the overall record counts, and it tells me that I've got 100 records in my incoming data, and that I've got 2 duplicates right out the bat. It knows that there's dupes in my data out of the 100. These are exact matching duplicates. If we look at some of the column metadata that we're getting back, it tells me things like, hey, you've got an empty city. You've also got a few empty zip codes and phone numbers. So you got 5 empty phone numbers. And we'll probably want to be able to address those. Alphanumeric counts, when we talk about states, for example, these could prove to be problematic. States should only be purely letters. You've got uppercase only counts. For states, that's perfectly fine, and this is good. But for emails, you probably want to standardize that into lowercase. Trailing spaces, this is also a problem, and it's seen here at email addresses. Maximum lengths. For zip codes, for example, it tells me you've got some zip codes that have a 7 digits, and that's not good. Same thing goes with states. States should only be a 2-digit abbreviation. Names that are inconsistent, it tells me I've got 5 inconsistent names. You did see, for example, a while ago where we got like the Jack and Jill dual names, for example. Those are inconsistent to the column, and it tells me there's about 5 of those that are inconsistent. You got state that are invalid. It tells me there's 3 states that are invalid, and probably because of those numbers that we saw. And then email syntax count. This tells me how many bad emails I have already due to incorrect syntax, and I've got 10 of those, and I probably want to fix those. Um, and then phone numbers invalid. It also knows that you've got 1 invalid phone number count. So now you can kind of see some of the problems that we're running into, and we want to be able to address all of that. Um, so what we're going to do now is we're going to move on. We're going to close these. Um, and now the data is getting passed through. All of this good stuff is getting passed through into the contact verify component, which does our correction, standardization, parsing, and validation. So if we take a look at the results we get from that component, and this is what we're seeing up here, um, all of this is all of the original information. So you got original full names, addresses, zip codes, emails, and phones. And then we get these columns back that have the MD prefix on them. And this is what the contact verify component is giving us back. So it's giving us the parsed out first and last names of these people. So, and all of these are now nicely standardized into title casing. Same thing goes with addresses. If you remember, we had some unabbreviated suffixes, or street suffixes, that are now nicely abbreviated. All the periods are gone, and the apartment information is now parsed into its own field. They're not anymore part of the address line, which is a nice, clean way to standardize your data. You've got states. Let's look for that one that had a number in it. That was nicely corrected over here. So that number is now gone, and it knows you what you meant is CA, not CA2. You've got missing zip codes down here, and this zip code that had more than 5 digits on it. So if we take a look at here on the right, you can see that those were all fixed as well. So nicely done, a job from the contact verify component for cleaning the data. Scrolling back up, you've got emails with incorrect syntaxes like the asterisks on the end. Those are also addressed. Phone numbers with invalid or unstandardized formatting like these have all been standardized into what they should be. And of course, we've still got some blank information here like phone numbers, and that's still part of the appending. We haven't gotten through that, so that will be shown in the next step. But last but certainly not the least, we've got these results. So we're able to provide you exactly with the information you need to be able to know what happened to your data. So say, for example, you get an AS01 record. What this means is that this address is perfectly good. It's a deliverable address. We've checked our reference data, and we've did a matching on your address, and we found that this address is actually mailable. All of these components are using a reference data in the backend to verify your information, including the phone numbers, including the emails, including the names. So we tell you whether they're good, bad names, if there's a suspicious name in there, if the email is not found. These are all going to be described to you through these result codes. It will tell you different things. And if there were any errors, we also tell you that there were errors like this EE03 code. And this stands for a specific type of problem, whether it's a syntax error or whatnot, or that the domain is not deliverable and so on. So we give you specific types of errors that tells you exactly what's going on with the record and what's bad with it. So yeah, with the contact verify component, again, we're parsing, we're standardizing, we're correcting, and we're verifying each of the domains individually. So if we move on, it now moves over to the personator component that will do our verifying, appending, and enriching. Now, there is a difference between the verification done in contact verify versus the verification done in personator, because personator takes verification uh, to the next level. And before I show you that, actually, if you notice here, I've got two output streams, one being the not verified stream. So I'm putting all of that data into a different stream, that information that did not verify, and I'm considering that as bad data. I'm just throwing them out to garbage. And then all my verified information are going to a separate stream, which will then go through the next component. So uh, let's take a look and understand why these records did not verify. What Personator is able to bring to the table is that it can actually tell you whether that person, that name, that address, whether the entire contact record is associated with each other. So you know that when it verifies that that person actually has that address, has that name, has that email. So it can verify all of his information together. Not just being able to tell you whether the address was deliverable, not just telling you whether the phone number is callable, but whether or not that person actually has that all of that information. And that's such a wonderful thing, I think. So I've split those up. Everything that did not verify, I put that in a separate field. I could choose to do what I want with that later on, but I'm just flagging those for now. Uh, but my remaining records, I want to show you what those look like now. I've got 86 good records that did validate. Um, so again, you've got it verified my information for me, but at the same time, it can also do appends, right? Uh, if we look here in our original phone number, for example, that was missing, if we scroll over to the right and take a look at the phone number now, you'll see that I now have a phone number. It got appended through the personator component. So if you've got missing information or even bad phone numbers, for example, if you got a bad phone number originally, we will append over that phone number with the correct one, whether it's missing, whether it's bad, or whatnot. And the same thing goes for emails and even addresses. You can append addresses based off of a phone number. If you didn't have that person's address, those can all be done through Personator. So pending missing information, really good feature of Personator. And then you've got the enrichment part. Things like being able to get latitude and longitude. This is, by the way, rooftop level geocoding. You've got date of birth, marital status, and a lot more. This is just a sample of some of the things that we can return for you when it comes to enrichment. And of course, yes, I flagged it. These are all verified records. So again, this is just a sample of some of the things that you can get. But the idea here is I want to be able to show you guys what you can do with these components. So now we've profiled our data. We know what the problems are. And then we've performed some form of hygiene through parsing, correction, standardization, validation. But then we took that a step further by being able to verify the entire contact data as a whole, and then appending a lot of the missing information, which is like the phone numbers. And that's some really hard stuff to append, mind you. And then on top of that, we've enriched the data with a lot more information. And again, there is a lot more things you can get from our enrichment data. You'll just have to take a look at those and let us know which ones you actually need, because most of the time we will have those. And then after it's gone through the personator component, we now go through the smart mover component. So I'm going to close this out and I'm going to continue on. So now it's processed through the smart mover component. All my verified records from personator now go through smart mover, which does my address updating. So this is the part where we want to keep things up to date. So if I scroll over to the right here, I can show you we've added a new column called move date, and some of these have a populated data on it. So this one has a move date. These guys also have move dates. But if we take a look at why they have a move date, the reason for that is if we take a look at the original address, this person has originally lived in 5201 Sand Hill Road. But now his new address is actually 13011 Caminito Marvilla. So what that means is that this person has moved with a move date of 2013-08, and we've now been able to provide you with his latest address. So this is how you keep your mailing information up to date all the time through the Smart Mover component. So we're able to give you all the moves for individuals and for businesses that have actually moved. And if you see here, there's quite a bunch in my data, so a lot of people have moved. Um, and we're able to get the new address for. So now, pretty straightforward step, Smart Mover. And then we move over to our matchup component for deduplication and consolidation. So if we take a look at the results for matchup here, the matchup component outputs two streams, right? I've split that out into my duplicate records and my unique records. So I've got 86 remaining records that were verified, and then I'm basically filtering out all of my dupes. That's what I'm doing, so that I'm only left with unique records. So through the matchup component, it finds all of my fuzzy matches, my fuzzy duplicates, and I can filter all of those duplicates out and only be left with my golden records, which keeps my data unique. So if we look at how that kind of worked here, these are my three duplicate data that I'm filtering out. So if we look here, you've got Vidupasani with this address, 9290 Town Center Drive. So this was deemed to be a duplicate. And what we've done is we've added, again, two new columns, a dupe count and a dupe group. It tells me that this record had a dupe group ID of 27 and that there were two records that were in that dupe group. So what that means is if we go in here in our unique records, if we try to find the same dupe group number, number 27, which is right here, you will see that this record is also from Vint Upasani 9290 Town Center Drive. So not to confuse anyone any further, but these two records, this guy and this guy, were two separate records in my original data. But now this has been filtered out because it was found to be a duplicate of this one. And it's not anymore included in my unique records. So based on the dupe groups, you can figure out which records were duplicates, which ones were not, and we can easily filter out all of the information, all of the records that aren't needed anymore because they're just messing up all of our data and creating extra space, extra records that are unnecessary. So pretty straightforward again, being able to dedupe your data, outputting all of the unique stuff. And now the last thing or the last step in my project after you've done your matchup and consolidation, matching and consolidation, is again to profile the component for monitoring purposes. And what that tells you is, again, we're just mimicking what we did in step one, where we tried to get all of the information originally about our data, where it tells me, I had 100 records, how many duplicates I had, and stuff about my column. So now I'm reprofiling it again, just to show you guys how my data has changed after all of this. Because now it's telling me that I only have 83 records because I've filtered out 14 records that weren't verified, and I've taken out 3 records that were deemed to be duplicates. So now I only have 83 records left. All the duplicates are now gone. It's telling me that there are 0 duplicates. How many empty data do I have? Originally, I had so much. Now I've got 0 empty records in my data sets. How many alphanumeric counts do I have? Originally in my state, I had alphanumerics, which was not good. Now it's down to 0. Email addresses are fine. You can have numbers and emails. Uppercase only count. All 83 records from states are all in uppercase. The uppercase for emails are now gone, which is what I wanted. Trailing spaces for emails were also removed and cleansed. Maximum lengths for states are now kept down to 2 that it should be, and postal codes are down to 5 to what it should be. Names, all of my inconsistent names are now gone. Originally I had about 5, I think. States that were invalid are also now gone. Email addresses that had bad syntaxes are also now cleansed, and phone numbers that were invalid before I had one of those, and now it's also gone because I've cleansed that. So I hope that I didn't overwhelm you with such a huge project here. it's really a step-by-step process. Important thing to remember here is that, again, basing it from that graph I showed you or that image I showed you about the data quality cycle, all of these are separate steps, from profiling, from cleansing, from enrichment and updating, and um, keeping your data up to date, and deduplication. These are all separate steps, but they all work together as one. They're all part of data quality and keeping your data clean and good. So, as much as possible, you want to be able to employ all of these data cleansing regimens in order to achieve full contact data quality. Um, and just in case you need to do just the deduplication part, you're more than welcome to do so. Um, if you just need to do matching, you could just drop in the matchup component, run your data through, and do the deduplication piece by itself. You don't necessarily have to go through all of these. Of course, since these components are separate, they work separately also. So you can just implement them one by one, if so you wish to do so. All right. And that's pretty much all that I wanted to show you for this one. And if you want to demo these components in SSIS, well, we can send you out the project here. You just have to click this arrow over here, and it'll show you or it'll let you download a link. It'll direct you to a download link for the components. And the awesome thing about these components, guys, is that we have a community edition for all these components. Uh, so, in other words, a lot of the functionalities we give out for free in SSIS. So, please do check out these community edition components and leverage our data quality capabilities right there and then. Uh, so, check those out again. Just downloads. My information on the screen if anyone wants to get in touch. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. Now we're going to move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. If you have any questions, please type those in right now. I do want to remind you that I will be sending out a link to a recording of today's webinar. I'll send that link that Joseph was talking about as well if you want to download these components. You should expect to receive it via email by the end of the week. So let's see if we can squeeze in a few questions right now. We're getting a lot of questions in, so let's just filter through, maybe find a question that a lot of people will have the same one. Okay, where do you get your reference data?
Just a second, guys. I'm having some problems with Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so where do we get our reference data? We multi-source our data. We've got a lot of uh, we get a lot of premium data from our partners. We don't actually disclose the actual sources of this data. Um, some of them we can, some of them we can't. But for example, for addresses, the way we're able to verify that the addresses are deliverable is because we leverage USPS data. So we have um, data from the post office. We got all the addresses in the United States, and that is how we're able to verify your addresses. But if you want to know about all of our data sources, some of them we might be able to give out, some of them we probably won't because these are proprietary sources. So, but yeah, USPS, for example, is one of them for addresses.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. How far back will NCOA accurately append the correct move date?
So our smart mover component is, you're right. If you notice the moves, the smart mover component makes use also of USPS data for national change of address, and it goes all the way back to 48 months. So you can, if anyone has moved within the last 48 months, we can give you the latest address for that person.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. Where is the data derived for the personator and smart mover components for verification, and how often is that updated?
So again, the smart mover component for the change of address is derived from NCOA data. Personator, however, is derived from a multitude of massive data sets. And I probably didn't emphasize this enough a while ago, but if you notice, if you remember, Personator is able to verify the name to an address to a phone to an email, and it can also append data, append missing phone numbers, append missing emails. And the way it's able to do this is through a massive collection of data sources that we get from our different vendors and a lot of different sources. Um, how often is that updated? It's not consistent because some are updated weekly, some are updated daily, some are updated bi-monthly, quarterly, yearly, ad hoc. Because there's a lot of sources, they don't all get updated at the same time. But uh, right now, the Personator service is updated at a monthly basis. So therefore, you will get refresh data every month.
Thank you, Joseph. What if we want to keep the old and the new addresses for all our clients in our dataset? Will this affect us using this tool?
Uh, Now, in case you're not familiar with SSIS, SSIS is an ETL tool. So um, doing what you want with the original data or the data that we give back is really up to you. You can move the data around, your original data, the data that we give you, the columns that we append. You can move those around freely however you want. And this is all done through SSIS because SSIS is an ETL tool, so it can do all of those data transformation uh, requirements that you want to be able to implement in the data. And this is easily done through SSIS, through the stock SSIS components.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. While using this custom SSIS tools, do I have to be connected to the internet?
Some of them you do, some of them you do not. Uh, for example, Smart Mover, which uses NCOA data, cannot be brought in house. Data for that cannot be brought in house. So it needs to be a web service call. This is a level of detail that needs to be discussed when you're actually using the components. So, um, yeah, for the most part, it can be brought in house, but depending on what you need to do, some might not be able to be brought in house. So, um, yeah, some of them might require a web service call.
If two records appear to be fuzzy, match on name and social security number, but the birthday is null, what happens? Does matchup treat nulls as equal values or not equal values?
So I didn't actually show you how to set up these components one by one. If you want to view or learn how to set up the components individually, I go into detail um, in my past webinars. So go to our website, www.melissadata.com, go to resources, go to webinars, and you will see uh, all of the past webinars that I've done for SSIS, and we explain each of the components individually, including the matchup component, where I show you how to set it up specifically. Because with matchup, I didn't show you this, but matchup is a very flexible tool. You can basically specify whatever rules you want uh, to be able to do the matching rules that you want to implement in your data. So if you want to do fuzzy match on the name and then just do an exact match on the social security, and then if the birth date is null or not empty for some and empty for or not empty for one and empty for another, and you still want to match that, this can all be done in the rules that you set up for matchup. So when you're doing matching using the matchup tool, the very first thing you do before anything else is to specify your matching rules. If you want to match just on names, that's fine. You can do that. If you want to match just on addresses, it's fine. You can do that. But you specify the rules in the matchup component, and it's very flexible. You can put in a lot of different combinations of rules if you wanted to do so. So yeah, this can be done through the component.
Is Community Edition limited to number of records it can process?
Uh, yes and no, because when you're using the community edition, for example, if you're using the deduplication tool, we do give you a maximum as far as the data size, but it's not going to stop working. It's going to continue working. It's just you can't work with enterprise level data sets. So if you've got records in the millions, then the community tool is not for you. You need to be able to license the enterprise tool themselves. But if you're working with excuse me, small data sets, you can keep using it, and it'll do the deduplication for you. 50K records, no problem. You can pass it through SSIS, and it'll keep working. It's not going to stop working. Um, so yeah.
Okay, so it looks like that's all the time we have now. We did get a lot of questions, so I will send these questions to Joseph, and he will send you guys an email. If you have additional questions, his info is on the screen, his phone number, his email, so he's happy to answer any more questions, so feel free to call him or email him. He's always available. And I just want to thank you again for attending today's webinar. I hope you're able to attend another webinar soon, and have a wonderful day, and see you next time.